My name is Dr. Sami Nassim, and I am the Director of the Office of Multicultural Programs and University Retention at Salve Regina University. I am originally from Alexandria, Egypt. I moved to the US in 1998 at the age of 25. And I'm here today to talk about multiculturalism. So before we start, what is multiculturalism? Multiculturalism can be defined as the coexistence of diverse culture, where culture include race, religion, sexual orientation, among other things. I think if we look at our society nowadays, within our own boundaries within the US, we are more diverse than ever and will always be more diverse than before. Statistics show how in 20 years, minority groups will be actually more than majority groups. We are a society, a melt of different cultures, and that's the beauty of our culture in the US. But let's talk about the importance of multicultural education to our new generation. Our society is becoming more global every day, and our sons and daughters, by the time they graduate from college, they're going to have to conduct a business and interact with people from all over the world. Actually, in my 20 years experience in higher education at the University of Delaware and Salve Regina University, among other institutions, the number one thing that people who hire graduate of the University of Delaware and Salve, the number one thing is they look for is the new graduate ability to interact in a diverse environment and diverse group of people. They don't look at the student GPA as deciding factors. They look at their ability to interact in a multicultural, multiracial society, because that is the future. We really need to understand how different culture look at things from different perspectives. There is no culture that is better than other cultures. They are different. Each culture is different, have their own values and belief system. And that's why sometimes we do not understand each other, even though we speak English. That is the form of communication. But how we, just the spoken language is one thing, and how to go about it is a different thing. So when we talk about communication, let's talk about verbal communication, for example. In some culture, like the Chinese culture, is unacceptable to look people in the eye because it's a sign of disrespect. And when you get a student who doesn't look you in the eye, in our culture, we usually make an alliance with that the student or that person who doesn't talk in the eye lack leadership skills, lack ability to connect with people. But for them, it's showing the person he or she talking to a sign of respect. Let's talk about personal space. I grew up in Alexandria, Egypt, for example. It's a city of millions of people, and I'm used to public transportation with limited spaces and people being near you and on top of you sometimes, literally. So personal space I don't need that much of a personal space. So while here in the US, a lot of us, what's acceptable personal space in the US is probably double the distance of what is my acceptable personal space. So being here at the beginning, I used to struggle because people will think I'm invading their personal space because I am talking very close to them. If you don't understand that might create a barrier with you working with someone from areas of the world that personal space is not as big as the personal space in the US. Touching. In some culture, touching is a sign of being friendly and being close to someone else. In other cultures, touching is unacceptable. That was me when I came here. I came from a touchy-feely culture, and little to know that it wasn't acceptable to put my hand on someone's shoulder while we're talking. I'm just being friendly, and in the different eye perspective, people looked at it as you are in my space. Silent period. Let's talk about when we're talking. I was called many times that I interrupted people while talking. In my culture, we have more of a conversation that we call it overlap, not interruption. So Sometimes it's acceptable for both people to talk at the same time. But because it is my culture, my brain is wired that way. I can continue the conversation. In other cultures, interruption is not acceptable. And when your brain is not wired to accept the interruption, you can't carry a conversation with someone interrupt you. You shut down. And you think that this person is unpolite or doesn't care about what you have to say. That's if you lack the culture understanding piece. Also, silent period. Let's talk about silent period. In the Latin American culture and Middle Eastern culture, people do not stop talking. When they start a conversation, it's ongoing. And studies have showed that in certain cultures, you can have a 25-minute conversation without a single pause that is ongoing. But in the US here, in our culture, we usually have some little time to pause when both speakers or more take a break. Actually, it's even more in the Japanese culture where people take a more silence period while this is going on. So that is why cultures are different. And unless you understand that, it will be harder for you to be able to work with people from different cultures. Even attitude toward the disclosure. What is acceptable to share with other people and what's not acceptable to share with other people. I belong to a big Egyptian community where some of the questions people in my culture at my church will ask me will be completely unacceptable if they ask it to an American person. But that is because there is stuff they can ask and they think it's okay to ask people who they don't know very close. So cultures are so unique and so different and come from a complete different perspective. From a business point of view, for example, and that's really important to our new generation. In many other cultures, people make business decisions based mainly on trust. They don't have FICO scores, they don't have a mortgage process, they don't have business process. They make decision into getting into business with other people based on establishing trust. So if we are American and we are overseas, let's say in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or even South America, and we think that everything happened in a process, in a certain order like what we used to here in the US, it will probably not work. Because overseas, they will take their time getting to know you personally, develop that trust before getting into business. So I'll give an example. Why Craigslist is so good and so famous here in the US? Because as a culture, as a society, we wanted the cheapest and the fastest product. In other culture, they wanted to buy something from someone who have an established relationship that trust me. That's one of the reasons I'm talking about myself. I never buy anything online because unless there is an established relationship, even with Macy's, I know where Macy's exists, I cannot go and buy something, but that's culturally ingrained on me. And people have to understand that. Imagine if your son or daughter knows that graduating out of college, how more successful they can be, how more culturally savvy they can be. Because we need to know that before our sons or daughter graduate or come to college, most of their life decisions we made for them as a parents. So we decide where they live, where they go to school, and who their family are. And that becomes the social network of those kids, of those young adults. If we live in an upper class neighborhood that is not as diverse, in turn, our son or daughter will probably go to school K-12 in around that area that is not as diverse. And if our own family is not as diverse, that is also will be the cycle of their friends. So if you look at the cycle of their friends, you will find one group of people throughout their K-12 and sometimes to graduate to college. How are they going to develop their cross-cultural competencies and be able to be multiculturally savvy if they only interact with one group of people? And I'm not only talking about majority groups, I'm talking about minority group like me. I am from Egypt. Until I came from Egypt, I didn't know anything about any other culture. I have very good experience. I know the Egyptian cultures very well, but I was clueless about any other culture. Was that helpful? No. So getting yourself out of your comfort zone, meeting people from different cultures, from different societies, can only make you more rounded and more successful, no matter what your belief is. It's not about changing your belief. It's about understanding the process, how people think differently, how people go about make decisions in their life, how people make business decision and then other decision.